Today, I really want to talk about Cherry Bomb and Pentious, who had a really epic love duet in episode 3 of season 2 of Hazbin Hotel. What's crazy is that as far as I'm aware, this was not a plan for Cherry Bomb at all at the time of the pilot when Cherry Bomb and Pentious were introduced together. So today, I want to talk about the crazy history of these two characters and how they became the surprise couple that everyone seems to love so much. Now for me, I don't really get the romance of Pentious and Cherry Bomb, but I really love what the romance does for Cherry as a character. Until this episode, Cherry Bomb had been just his satellite for Angel, another friend for him to have and bounce his story off of. But Cherry was also implied to have some great stories planned for her as well in each stage of development. And as far as I'm aware, none of them had anything to do with Pentious in particular, even at the time of the pilot. For me, the moment I had been waiting for with Cherry since the beginning was the moment we got in this episode where she finally takes the key and decides to actually be a member of the Hazbin Hotel. And the question had always been, what was going to be the dramatic thing that made her decide she wanted redemption too, instead of just being a friend of Angel's who likes to stop by? It's amazing that she made this choice in order to get into heaven to be with someone she loves, as there's probably a lot of people in hell who have a loved one in heaven they would like to see again, and this is one of the more positive reasons that people should be staying at the hotel and trying to get redemption. But the fact that it's with Pentious is kind of weird to me. So let's break down why. To start, as a lot of you know, Hazbin Hotel was originally meant to be a side story in a comic called Zoophobia. This was a story that VisiPop began drawing a long time ago at this point, featuring a large cast of crazy mythological creatures that would have eventually gotten into the story planned for Hazbin Hotel with the conflict between heaven and hell. The original Zoophobia comic only ever managed to get out one full volume, with the story for Heaven and Hell not being planned until something like volume 6 or 7. But VisiPop became so interested in these characters that she began drawing comic strips and promotional art for them, before eventually deciding to spin them off into their own show in their own world with Hazbin Hotel. In the original story, the cast had wildly different origins, such as Angel not being gay, but actually being in a relationship with none other than Vaggie, instead of Vaggie being a lesbian and part of the main power couple with Charlie. There were a lot of differences like this, but among the most extreme of all of these character changes comes from Cherry Bomb herself. The art of Cherry Bomb in the original Zoophobia style shows that she was originally going to be an angel in heaven instead of another sinner in hell. And more interestingly, she wasn't going to be just one of Angel's friends, but his actual daughter from his life on Earth. In the show we have now, there's no evidence that Angel had any descendants, let alone a serious romantic relationship with a woman where this might have happened. In the official Hazbin Hotel story that we ended up getting, Angel ends up having a sister in heaven instead of a daughter, with Angel's sister Molly taking the place of Cherry as someone in heaven that he might be missing. But Cherry wasn't just going to be some random daughter in heaven that Angel was longing for, but someone who seemed to have just as much a stake in the battle against heaven as Angel himself. You see, in Zoophobia, Cherry Bomb's name was still going to be Cherry Bomb, and as you can see from this artwork, this was because she still had an expertise with explosives. This was likely part of Angel's origin story that we still get in the show, where he was part of an Italian mob family. While Cherry did end up getting into heaven like Molly did, she seems to be a lot less innocent with her whole bombs thing. During her human life, she was probably using them in order to help with the Italian mob crimes, and then in the afterlife, her goal was going to be to use this in order to rebel against heaven and help the Hazbin Hotel crew, including her father. Like with the current Hazbin Hotel, the original story within Zoophobia was going to focus on the idea that heaven was a bit corrupt, and that people who maybe shouldn't be getting into heaven still were. Vaggie actually talks about this in one comic strip as being the basis of the rebellion, claiming she says she knows people that have done far worse things than her, but who still ended up in heaven. Though she seems to be acknowledging here that no one in hell is actually guilt-free. When VisiPop began to redevelop the Hazbin Hotel characters for their own show, Cherry Bomb's story as Angel's family would be erased entirely, with Angel being turned gay and Cherry becoming his moral support as a friend. With this, however, Cherry Bomb was also given her own potential subplot to be explored in the show. In the pilot, we do see Cherry Bomb interacting with Pentious, of course, and in one of the very first scenes of the series, no less. But from what I understand, Pentious was not originally meant to be an important character in Hazbin Hotel at all, let alone to Cherry Bomb in particular. Not only was he not planned to be the first redeemed sinner, apparently he wasn't intended to appear after the pilot. At the time of its development, he was made to be a one-off villain, setting up the idea that overlords had turf wars, and setting up the plot for Cherry Bomb to be one of those overlords in these various battles. VisiPop supposedly had so much fun with the character, however, that she began developing more and more with him, to the point where it seems like Pentious actually gets a lot more screen time than Cherry, and development really, with Cherry Bomb really just becoming the other half to Pentious in the story instead of her own individual character, I would say. This is interesting to me because originally, I think Cherry Bomb was going to have a similar plot about lost love and wanting to try and redeem herself in order to be with them, and it wasn't even going to be for a guy who made it into heaven, I think. This character is believed to have appeared in the Hazbin Hotel music video called Addict, which takes place after the pilot, but before the actual Hazbin Hotel series, and is probably not really canon anymore. Cherry Bomb has an interesting part in this music video where she sings about what bums her out in hell, and while doing so, the camera pans to the memory of some character from her past. A lot of fans thought this character looked like Angel and perhaps one of the members of his family, perhaps being a spider demon like him and also seemingly having a mafia vibe with his hat. However, he also has just one eye, like Cherry. And this similarity implies either a personality similarity between them or a direct relation between them, similar to how Angel's father and brother are both spider demons like him. Some fans claim that this character is named Izzy, a character originally from Zoophobia who was supposed to be an angel hunter. But here he looks like he's just another sinner in the show. But after the Addict music video, this character was never elaborated on or seen again as far as I'm aware. I'd like to believe that whatever the origin of the character, the intent was going to be that Cherry Bomb ends up coming to stay at the hotel because of an emotional arc dealing with the loss of this character. Perhaps with him dying in one of the recent exterminations, and Cherry deciding that she doesn't want this for himself, especially if he maybe pushed for her to get away from it. Regardless, the point is that as far as we're aware, Cherry Bomb wasn't originally meant to be the love interest of Pentious. But just like with Cherry Bomb having her own history of development into this half of the relationship, we have some idea about the original plans for Pentious and how he worked his way up to the character he is today. Now, Pentious has a very important place in the story, and before it was decided he would be an ongoing character, someone else had to have died at the end of season 1 and made it into heaven. And my theory is that originally, this role of Pentious was meant to go to Baxter. Baxter is a character we've known about since the Hazbin Hotel pilot, with Baxter appearing as well as a lot of different characters in the background of Charlie's song, "Inside of Every Demon There's a Rainbow." Like Pentious, Baxter is also a crazy genius, and the whole joke in season 2 is how Baxter is the new Pentious, but he's not really because I think Baxter came first. Baxter, from what I remember from back in the early Hazbin fandom days, was a character originally proposed to Vivziepop by one of her friends or family members. But because of this, Vivziepop said she actually struggled to write for the character. With Pentious, however, a lot of the same basic ideas were able to play out in a new persona that Vivziepop seemed a lot more comfortable with. And what's crazy is it led to Baxter still making it into the show in season 2. Instead of Baxter being an independent character, however, his personality became easier to work with as someone who's connected to Pentious through how people like Nifty see them as the same basic person. If Pentious wasn't originally meant to be an ongoing character, someone else had to be the one to actually get into heaven at the end of season 1. And I don't think it was going to be Angel with how much more development he and Valentino and Husk have going for them. But when Pentious was decided to become a character, he would be given that basic arc, with Baxter later being able to come in as a replacement for him in the Hazbin Hotel cast. But what do you guys think? This was a video I honestly wanted to get out last week, but it was so busy last week that I didn't really get the chance, so here we are today. If you want early access to all of my Hazbin Hotel content, be sure to sign up right here on YouTube for our Early Access Memberships Club, as when the finale airs on Wednesday, I'll be uploading all of my different theories and lore breakdowns as one giant audio upload, before slowly editing the visuals over them and putting them out one at a time over the next few weeks. And if you haven't checked it out yet, head on over to our side channel, Random Universe, to check out the mythological breakdown I did for the Magical Girl anime, Magical Girl Madoka. See you guys there.